Star Trek 4's long delay is a direct result of J.J. Abrams' biggest 2009 reboot change. Star Trek Beyond broke a classic Star Trek tradition, but Leonard Nimoy's whale movie did it first. In 2016, Star Trek Beyond was released as the third installment of J.J. Abrams' reboot series that started in 2009. The film depicts Captain James T. Kirk's Chris Pine crew facing off with an ominous new adversary, Krall, Idris Elba. However, the Starship Enterprise doesn't play a big part in the movie. Captain Kirk, Dr. Leonard McCoy, Carl Urban, Commander Spock, Zachary Quinto, and the rest of Star Trek Beyond's crew end up using other means to defeat Krall. This approach wasn't the first of its kind, despite being an interesting change for the Star Trek reboot franchise. Leonard Nimoy's Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, depicted the original USS Enterprise crew without their ship as well. After the destruction of the Starship Enterprise in Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, Admiral Kirk, William Shatner, and his crew use a commandeered Klingon bird of prey to travel back in time. The ship, ironically named the HMS Bounty by Dr. McCoy, DeForest Kelley, provided the film with a change of scenery that more Star Trek movies could benefit from. Star Trek Beyond broke the same tradition as Leonard Nimoy's whale movie. Captain James T. Kirk's Chris Pine USS Enterprise is destroyed early in Star Trek Beyond, leaving the ship's crew stranded on the planet Ultimate. They have to face off against Krall with nothing more than an old and broken-down Starfleet ship, the Scott Bakula-era USS Franklin. Although the Franklin is still part of the Federation's history, its operation by Kirk and the crew marks an important dynamic shift. The use of another ship breaks the Star Trek tradition of the Enterprise being the ship to save the day, operated by a familiar crew who knows the starship inside and out. In Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, the original series crew finds themselves in a similar situation. Without the Enterprise, they pilot a stolen Klingon bird of prey to travel back in time to save Earth from certain doom. Kirk's crews in different Star Trek timelines, operating without their traditional starship, gives both movies an extra edge. Our Starfleet heroes must think outside the box and improvise new ways to overcome impossible odds. Star Trek movies are sometimes more interesting without the Enterprise. Star Trek Beyond's ending proves that the crew of the Starship Enterprise is indeed still a crew, even without the Enterprise. By working together on the barely operational USS Franklin, they defeat Krall and save the day. Like in Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, the USS Franklin's makeshift crew even used music, Beastie Boys' Sabotage, to disorient their enemies. This dynamic helped both films explore the characters on a deeper level since they didn't have the familiarity of the Enterprise to back them up in battle. Instead, audiences saw the crews use their skills and ingenuity to survive. The entire Star Trek timeline is full of adventures of the USS Enterprise in its different incarnations. In different universes and time periods, the iconic Star Trek ship houses some of the franchise's best stories. However, without the Enterprise, its crew is left to develop unorthodox plans to defeat or prevent whatever evil may be threatening them or the Federation. Star Trek Beyond is a great example of the no Enterprise tactic originally used in Star Trek 4. This tactic could still benefit Star Trek because it often leads to more interesting dynamics than the classic Enterprise tradition. Star Trek Beyond, 2016, the third installment in the rebooted Star Trek film series, stands out not only for its thrilling action and emotional depth, but also for breaking one of the longest-running traditions in Star Trek films, the destruction of the USS Enterprise. While fans were certainly not unfamiliar with seeing the iconic starship come under heavy fire or face catastrophic scenarios, Star Trek Beyond did something unexpected. It destroyed the Enterprise early in the film. Yet, this break from tradition is not unprecedented in the Star Trek universe, as Leonard Nimoy, the actor behind the legendary character Spock, had already ventured into similar territory decades earlier. The destruction of the Enterprise, a risky move in Star Trek Beyond. The narrative takes an unconventional route by obliterating the USS Enterprise less than 30 minutes into the film. This sequence is an emotional roller coaster for both the crew and the audience, as we witness the ship being systematically dismantled by the film's antagonist, Krall, played by Idris Elba. With its warp nacelles ripped apart and its hull breached, the ship crashes onto the surface of the planet Ultimate, leaving Captain Kirk, Chris Pine, and his crew stranded. This decision to destroy the Enterprise so early in the movie was a bold move. Traditionally, the ship's destruction had been saved for climactic moments or final acts in Star Trek films. The Enterprise itself has always been more than just a vessel. It is a symbol of exploration, unity, and hope. By tearing it apart in the first act, Star Trek Beyond broke with expectations, leaving the characters and the audience to grapple with the loss of this iconic symbol. The history of Enterprise destruction, despite the shock value of seeing the Enterprise destroyed so early in the film, this is not the first time fans have witnessed the demise of the beloved starship. In fact, the destruction of the Enterprise has occurred several times throughout Star Trek's long history, but it was always treated with weight and significance, usually as a climactic or pivotal event. The first on-screen destruction of the USS Enterprise occurred in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, 1984, a film that was not only directed by Leonard Nimoy, but also set a precedent for how such a moment could be used for dramatic impact. In this film, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, is forced to self-destruct the Enterprise to prevent it from falling into the hands of Klingon forces. This marked a defining moment in Star Trek cinema, as the ship's destruction became an act of sacrifice and strategy rather than a moment of defeat. Nimoy, who had become a significant creative force behind the scenes, understood the emotional resonance of such an event. By orchestrating the Enterprise's destruction, he elevated the stakes of the story, making it clear that the ship was a symbol, but not the heart of Starfleet's mission. It was the crew, their relationships, and their ideals that mattered most. Leonard Nimoy's influence. Bold storytelling. Leonard Nimoy's impact on the Star Trek franchise goes far beyond his role as Spock. His directorial efforts in Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, and Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home showed his willingness to challenge the status quo and push the boundaries of Star Trek storytelling. By destroying the Enterprise in Star Trek III, Nimoy broke new ground, illustrating that Star Trek could be about loss, rebirth, and change, concepts that are central to the franchise's enduring legacy. Nimoy's decision to destroy the Enterprise in Star Trek III paved the way for future films to explore similar themes of sacrifice and renewal. His influence is apparent in the way Star Trek Beyond handles the destruction of the ship. While the Enterprise's demise in Beyond may seem abrupt and jarring, it serves a purpose: to strip the crew of their safety net and force them to rely on their ingenuity and camaraderie. In this sense, Nimoy's storytelling philosophy, which emphasized the human and alien relationships at the heart of the story, echoes through the film. Breaking the tradition with a nod to the past, what makes Star Trek Beyond unique is not just that it destroys the Enterprise, but how it does so within the first act of the film. The early destruction serves as a catalyst for the character-driven plot, allowing the crew to showcase their individual strengths and teamwork outside of the familiar confines of the starship. In many ways, this reflects Nimoy's earlier work, where the destruction of the Enterprise symbolized more than a physical loss. It represented a turning point for the characters. Leonard Nimoy was always about pushing Star Trek into uncharted territories. Whether it was by killing off Spock in Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, only to resurrect him in the following film, or by shattering the familiar image of the Enterprise, Nimoy's contributions continually challenged audiences to see the franchise as a dynamic, evolving story rather than a static one.